minus 3, 2, 1, 0.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Launch Sequence Podcast. I am your host, Space Tomato, and today we're going to talk about some interesting news. So we're going to talk all about mining today because I've brought in the one, the only RedMonster, master of mining. But also some really interesting news dropped today. If you're watching this when it releases, then a few days ago, CitizenCon physically has been canceled for this year. Well, not announced for this year, and it's going to be all digital. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. And then we're going to get into the mining changes of 4.1 and kind of what's going on in Star Citizen's sandbox. RedMonster, thank you for joining me today, dude.
Yeah, of course. It's always a pleasure.
How have you been?
I've been doing good. Just continuing. There's a lot of changes that are happening to mining right now. We got a new starter ship. We got a mining mech suit that you and I got to try out. That's been, really fun. And yeah, we're seeing some of those mining changes that were talked about last year at CitizenCon on kind of the road to 1.0. And we're seeing the tip of the iceberg here, and I think we've got a lot of meat left behind it. So it's an exciting time to be in the industrial space for sure. So.
Yeah, I'm actually kind of surprised at. I don't want to say surprised. I'm pleasantly. I guess it's just nice to see that there are some things that are coming from that 1.0 discussion that are already hitting the game, as far as like missions and factions and new categories of stuff.
Yeah.
What kind of stuff? We're kind of jumping straight into this, but what kind of stuff did you see from CitizenCon last year that you are feeling like is coming in now?
Well, I think number one, the resource updates. They're starting with the gemstones and your FPS versus your vehicle minables. Those
Yeah.
have now gotten split out, so we got new minerals coming in that way. And we're seeing those tied into the Align and Mine event, and yeah, I think really starting to diversify away from each kind of mode of mining have its specialized minerals. Hopefully that means we're going to start seeing the new mineral distribution for the ores come up, where it's going to be kind of that like one type of material with a quality level, rather than seeing a rock with like 4 different types of ores in it. So
Yeah, I
I think
cannot wait.
that's potentially on the horizon. And then I really just I know with Wicklow coming in, we now have bartering. So you've got more to do. Like you can trade in your goods for more than just in-game credits, and buy ships and stuff with that. So that's an interesting one.
In-game rewards. It only
Mhm.
took 12 years. Yeah,
Yeah.
that is a nice one. Okay, so before we get too far into things, I want to give anybody a chance who hasn't gotten. I mean, you're a regular on this show, but it's been a little while since you've gotten to sit down. For anybody who's new, you want to introduce yourself and let folks know kind of where you're coming from, why
Yeah.
your mining perspective matters.
Yeah, so I'm RedMonsterSC. I live stream on Twitch. I produce videos on my YouTube channel. You can find me there. I also run an industrial focused organization called the Red Legion. And we do a Sunday morning mining session basically every week. We go out and we push the boundaries on group mining. We're trying to do large scale group activities. Couple of weeks ago, we were doing bag swaps out in the field and doing a refinery run with a cargo ship, leaving our other mining vehicles out there, and just having a good coordinated industrial focused group, both between mining, salvage, and looking down the line, further down that supply chain into refining and eventually crafting are um, areas that I've always kind of been interested in for Star Citizen to develop. As someone who's kind of an engineering mindset, looking at optimizing and efficiency, it's always kind of tickled the right part of my brain, and so I really enjoy diving into that, helping people be a little bit more efficient with their own mining operations, and maybe inspiring them for larger scale group events that are a little bit harder to handle. Because you've probably seen this a little bit. If once you start getting into that massively multiplayer online, it's a lot of herding cats to keep people aligned to the right goals. And and kind of progressing on a complex industrial front. So
Yeah, and there are just a couple small changes with mining that we still don't have. Unfortunately, I would have loved with this update
mm,
that would make it so much deeper. Being able to transport the cargo pods and kind of be able to turn them into refineries for
yeah,
somebody else's jobs. That would, oh gosh, that would massively increase how much big mining could be, I feel.
yeah, and we've kind of we were experimenting. There was a couple of like with the most recent patch, you have to have the ship stored in order to refine it. But a couple of patches ago, you could refine from a ship that was just out in the hangar. So we were doing this kind of complex workaround where a certain person was responsible for storing all of the full ore pods in the hangar. So we bring we had the Argo raft that was actually transporting them in, drop the pods off. They'd send them down the cargo like freight elevator, and then somebody with a whole bunch of fresh pods, they'd pull up a set, load them onto the raft, and then the raft would go back out and do another bag swap. Um, you know that that's the type of gameplay we want to be able to see in the future, and
Hmm.
more dedicated to saying, okay, well, we will have player owned refineries, or we'll have the ability to transfer ownership, or just refine straight from the ore pod instead of having it to be tied to a mining ship. So those type of things, I think, are what's needed to really scale up beyond what the current mining situation is, as well. Um, kind of feeding further into that supply chain pipeline. So
I think the ownership system, which is kind of involved there, is one of those things that's a like really playability focused change that they could
yeah.
probably, if they could get that this year, I think that would make a really big difference, a huge difference to the game for a lot of people. I hope they could do that.
Um, yeah, I know like with our we had a mining event earlier this week. Um, as I left the party and kind of exited game, like the people who were still hauling that 8 SCU box we were offloading into, they ran into problems because I was the party lead and had to, owning that. I left the party, and then all of a sudden, the ownership of that box just kind of went into a no man's land. So they had to
Yeah.
transfer it out
Gosh.
and be able to sell that way. So it's
Ah, Star Citizen fun.
yeah, it's a workaround citizen most days. That's kind of what it seems like at least now. I see some improvement happening, but we'll keep our fingers crossed that that's the same direction it goes.
All right. Does it feel like it's getting better throughout the year for you or kind of stagnant?
Honestly, like 4.1 patch with the new mining stuff feels like a really big improvement. I think one of the things I struggled with most was that for like mining, your entry level ship was a prospector for $155, which I don't think is a reasonable price point for an entry level game loop. Um, and coming in with the Golem now, that's kind of at that $60 range. That is a lot more reasonable for a player that, let's say, they're interested in Star Citizen, but they don't want to be a dogfighter, right? That'll get them into the mining gameplay loop, and I think it'll be really successful. At least from my experience using the Golem, it'll be a good player experience for newcomers.
Do you think that going forward, people should solely stick to the dollar value of the ships in terms of what they're worth or where they should start, or should it be UEC?
I mean, realistically, the way that people are getting into the game right now is they've got a pledge, right? And that's that value, pledge versus the AUEC. It's there's always a balancing act, but I feel like you're kind of aiming for a specific target. Most modern games are in the 60 to, sometimes if you get like the DLCs and the season pass pre-orders and stuff, you could be up over $100. Um, that's where modern games are kind of charging you, and to be at that $60 price point is good. Long term, looking at AUEC versus that value, um, I think it might make sense for long term players, but then you're always going to have people who might have waited to try the game and they want to get in now. And if they've got a specific game loop in mind, they know they're going to be interested in, making it accessible at the entry level for them is going to be a lot better long term success for CIG in general.
That is true. I mean, making starter ships in every category is
Yeah.
pretty important. Something we were talking about on the stream earlier today is, are there any categories of gameplay right now that are kind of rep and mission driven that, or even not? I mean, mining doesn't have rep or mission, but any parts of the game that have a decent amount of gameplay involved that don't have a dedicated starter ship now.
I mean,
And that is, I'm sorry, that is to include the RSI concept as the salvage starter that they're kind of working towards.
yeah. Um, we've got mining, salvage, bounty hunting, cargo hauling. You talk about racing as well. I think salvage right now with the RSI salvage ship coming in, which is hopefully going to be in the starter ship position. I feel like that brings everything kind of in line that you can get a starter ship for 50 or 60 bucks in the specific gameplay loop you wanted to focus on. And then from there, you can diversify, earn up, buy things with in-game credits. But to get your initial start the way that you want to make money out of the gate, um, I think it's hard to. I'm not coming up with anything right now, like any gameplay loops that I don't think are serviced in that kind of entry level price range. So
Okay. Uh, Last question on this then. Do you think that was always their plan? Or do you think they wanted to initially have people have to work their way into the professions?
yeah, I mean, um, it's hard to say what their initial plan may or may not have been. There's kind of this perceived
Nice, no
value and the
knowing.
FOMO, right? But I will say, it might make sense that you keep mining as a little bit more of a higher barrier to entry while you're still working through the gameplay and kind of getting it developed, just so that people who are new to the game as they're coming in, maybe they're not going into a gameplay loop that's struggling, that's not effective, and maybe that's part of the reason why the prospector started initially. But we've seen mining really progress over quite a few years now. That it's a reliable gameplay loop. It's not always the most profitable, but that's like the economic balancing that they really need to, I think, get nailed down. It changes every patch, and it's more or less aiming at new gameplay loops they want to push people to, or what they're going to incentivize and kind of push that economic reward for.
I feel that. All right, man. Let's talk about CitizenCon. This was a interesting little drop of information. Sorry, I'm trying to pull my notes together here. This is an interesting little drop of information that came out of, well, didn't come out of nowhere. This was actually the week last year that they made their official kind of Q&A about CitizenCon coming out. This is when they made everything official and kind of got the hype started for the CitizenCon event. And it usually hits around this time. I mean, it hit this
Yeah,
time in 2023. I think it was April or May.
yeah,
So we were due to hear something, and we were all kind of like, "What's going on with this?" But it makes sense that it's now going digital. I think for a few reasons, but I'd love to hear your take on it.
yeah. First off, I'm glad we got some information. I know there were some folks hoping like maybe we'd do Montreal or Austin again, or go back to Manchester since they probably have a lot of stuff on site. Um, there was a lot of promises made last year at CitizenCon as far as Squadron release and their Road to 1.0. There's a lot of exciting content, and we saw the big reveal of like kind of the player-owned space stations towards the end there. Um, I think it makes sense if you're on that dead sprint to the finish line. Running a live convention probably slows down some of that progress because people are worried about getting it polished up for kind of that. I don't necessarily want to call it an arbitrary deadline because I do feel like CitizenCon is about celebrating with the community and kind of showcasing what's there. I'm bringing that back so you don't have to run the full live event as well, letting people focus on just producing the best damn space sim ever and getting those deadlines. I think it's a smart choice. I am gonna miss the opportunities for networking because I've gone to two Citizen Cons now. I did LA 2 years ago, Manchester last year, and the environment around it is phenomenal. There's bar
Yeah.
citizens every night. You're constantly meeting, networking with folks, and having those opportunities, to rub shoulders with the game devs before and after the convention. I'm gonna miss that aspect, but I feel like the community has done really well with like the bar citizen meetups and the bar citizen world tour that CIG is going to be incorporating. Um, you'll still have the networking opportunities, but maybe not as um, you know not as centralized as you might at an in-person CitizenCon. So
Yeah.
hopefully next year will go back into kind of the in-person and give you that opportunity. But yeah, I understand the decision, and interested to see. They talked about being a little bit more condensed format than previous ones. So I
Well,
am.
that's what you mentioned. There's probably what's on a lot of people's mind is this them kind of saying, "Hey, we're going to go digital from now on and just do this over the internet all the time?" Or do you think it's a 1 year thing? Do you think this is because they're particularly crunching this year? You had mentioned that they promised a lot of stuff or talked about a lot of stuff last year. Do you
Yeah.
think they feel like they can't present more until that's done, so they're just kind of pulling back? Or are they what do you think that angle from?
Yeah. Well, I think it's a matter of priority, right? Their priority is to get Squadron out the door, get us a Star Citizen 1.0 release, and everything that kind of snowballs into that critical path, and putting on a live event for 5,000 people over a day or 2 days. There's a lot of logistics involved. There's a lot of your designers and programmers that are focusing now on creating a good presentation and going through the reviews, and you spend a lot of time supporting that. I think um that's it's a high priority, but not as high priority as actually delivering on some of those promises we've gotten. So
Yeah, and those demos just, I mean, they've done
yeah.
better recently, probably the last like 2 years, but historically, those demos have just been complete fabrications to the point where they don't even end up in the game. Like we're just getting the sandworm
Yeah.
from 2016.
Right.
um, and then also just like with that, like sometimes in 2016, that was a Planet Tech demo, but because they showed gameplay, it looks like a gameplay demo. And so there's always just
Yeah.
these misunderstandings from the live citizen cons. And I know they could do that with videos, but I think it is pretty important right now to focus on getting the game done. And especially with financial pressures, they
Hmm.
probably want to look like they're getting the game done as well as actually getting
Yeah.
it done.
But like we also look, what are they like? They just hit 800 million. We're talking about um, uh, new funding coming in at kind of record levels this year compared to previous. And back in what was like November, December, they talked about shifting into focusing on performance optimizations for the persistent universe, and less committing to the features, getting them out, and making sure that the game works. Because things had been pretty rough after CitizenCon. Like we all had that hype, and then server performance was terrible. Gameplay and events that they were trying to push just were causing the servers to crap out. Um, that all kind of feeds in, and yeah, there is certain financial pressure there, but yeah, I think they have a little bit of leeway, and the way that they're doing it so far is good. Um, kind of trying to address a lot of those. The gameplay inhibitors rather than kind of the new features. So,
Do you think do you think during CitizenCon in 2024 they planned to not have a physical CitizenCon in 2025?
I don't know. I um, I feel like they did a really great production there, being there in person, seeing everything that went into it, the event center and the spaces they had. It looked phenomenal. I could see some of those set pieces and assets maybe being reused in the future. And they built a life size, or kind of a third scale Hornet, but it was still like impressive, right? So
Yeah, it's huge.
I don't think they went into CitizenCon 2024 or 2954, right? Um, I don't think they went in expecting to not have an in-person CitizenCon next year. I think it was just um, that was maybe a decision behind the scenes saying, okay, we have to hit certain milestones at this point as a go no go decision on in person versus going digital, and maybe some of those milestones they said were we're not where we need to be. So
Yeah, so something probably has changed, and I wonder if it is the aftermath of 4.0. I mean, we obviously know that things are expected to be rough, but they also wanted to have the transit refactor done. They wanted to have the mission refactor done. They wanted to have
yeah,
engineering in the game. So they're a bit behind where they were. And I wonder if, excuse me, I wonder if it's that's holding them up with this, or if it's something more Squadron 42 focused that's holding them
yeah.
up, since that is a very important
Well,
release as well coming up.
they've they've certainly had some unprecedented changes since CitizenCon. I mean, they like at the beginning of the year they canceled a free flight event because performance on the servers was not where it needed to be, and they felt like
Yep.
that would be a terrible new player experience, which it absolutely would have been. And I think it was the right call there. But yeah, that um, they've gone to digital citizen cons before, during COVID, and that was um, I feel like that was successful. We missed a little bit of the backer versus developer employee kind of interactions, but they were successful with that, and I think they knew that could have that's a fallback plan that they really could have um, kind of been successful still while delivering a CitizenCon experience in a lighter method.
Yeah. How important do you think it is to be there in person versus just getting the information they share?
I mean, getting the information they share is like number one, right? But having the opportunity to go and interact then with the backers, I know after a couple of the panels, I saw Thorsten getting an interview, and I went over and talked to him about some of the changes I saw in mining, and he was like, "Oh yeah, like having a little bit of a discussion on the side there, like." That's icing on the cake, but the real like meat and potatoes of it is to talk about what's coming up, showcase some of the features that are being developed. Um, I'd say it would be 80% getting that content out, and then like maybe 20% of having that backer networking opportunities. So
Hmm. So in your opinion, they're not really missing out on much by going not physical. They're still doing most of what you would normally be doing at a CitizenCon.
yeah, I think that's probably the route it's going. We'll be able to see that as it happens. It's just they'll be recorded segments instead of a live presentation, and so
Yeah, I think like in 2022, it was they were like they had finally been able to actually do a digital CitizenCon, which was
yeah,
I actually liked that. I think that was their first like
yeah,
good CitizenCon.
yeah. You had
Um,
you had one of the commercials in there for your garden, right?
oh
Yeah,
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 yeah. That was back when they were doing the
yeah,
right. They did the videos of all the orgs in between the shows. Yeah, we had a good
yeah.
one of everybody dying, I think. But like
uh,
we all do it together. It's
yeah. My entry there was the Project Backspace video, so it was
nice. Still a very popular project.
yeah.
Um, so let's talk about 4.1. Or actually, wait, hold on. I have one more thing to ask. One more thing about CitizenCon to ask. If they are doing a digital CitizenCon this year, tell me, Red Monster, tell me, does that mean that the last CitizenCon before the release of Squadron 42 is digital?
Ooh. Mm. Um, that's a tough one. The hopium part of me says Squadron 42 release will happen with the in-person CitizenCon in Manchester 2026. that we'll get some big announcement there. It'll be this big, glorious moment. But like that's a whole lot of hopium, and I know people in chat are gonna be screaming about that.
That also means the people at CitizenCon miss out on the game releasing. They're
Right,
like, I want to
getting
be home.
yeah, like trying to get people out of there as fast as possible so they can go home, download, and actually play.
Hmm.
But yeah, yeah, that's the hope. But of course, being in October, I'd hate to wait that long. But we've all been kind of um, insufferably patient. You know,
Yeah, I don't know, man. I don't know. I mean, so you're accepting that that is like the minimum. That is the
yeah.
earliest that you'd see a release is CitizenCon of 2026.
No, no. I'm just if you wanted to have a big hype build
Oh,
up
like a
moment,
perfect. Okay.
yeah, like that would be the peak of the mountain, the top of Everest, and that whole celebration moment. But having an in-person CitizenCon, having the release actually happen, and uh, getting that, like that'd be a pretty big hype moment. But at the same time,
Yeah.
like are they gonna drum it up and maybe drag things out, or is it gonna be ready in time? That there's a lot of questions. We don't know the progress, and we've got hope, and that's dangerous sometimes.
Yes, all the time.
A lot of speculation. So
I think this pretty much puts the nail in the coffin for me for any sort of 2026 release before that CitizenCon. I think that's where I'm
yeah,
leaning. They it's Chris Roberts, man. Of course he's gonna do a release event of some sort, and he can't
yeah,
do that in a digital CitizenCon. So
yeah,
I think I think we're probably going to see a first trailer for this game. Well, okay, we saw that Squadron 42 trailer. I think we're gonna see like a proper trailer released at the Video Games Awards this year. I would. That's what I
yeah,
would do. And then a second trailer at what's it called? Gamescom, the German
yeah, yeah,
convention.
yeah,
Yeah, in 2026, and then a release like 2 weeks after CitizenCon 2026.
yeah. I think that would make sense, timing wise, just to build the hype. And you got to wonder like how much they're competing against, kind of if they're aiming for the game show awards and game of the year type stuff. Like,
Oh,
are
dude,
they
with
going to
Squadron?
delay? Yeah, with like Grand Theft Auto and some of those others that have gotten pushed a little bit. Like, do you kind of shuffle a little bit so that you've got a better shot with a release date that might not compete there? Um, you know,
Well, that's why you don't want to release this year. And then Grand Theft Auto delays, and you're like, we're
yeah,
2027 actually.
yeah. So
That's the thing that sucks about GTA 6 right now is like you have tons and tons of games that are waiting to announce their release dates, and it's like, okay, if you maybe you hit us at a certain window where it's okay for us to push back, but you can't really release early. Like releasing
yeah.
video games early is just bad.
And I think everybody saw it in bright gold letters 2026. So that's the commitment that has been made. And I think there's a lot of naysayers, and that would be a lot of ammunition if it ends up pushing. So
Well, it could always end up pushing. I would. I hate to say it, but like if they're gonna botch the release, I'd prefer they just delay again.
yeah,
And at some point, I would advocate for them to lose support for delaying it too many times like that. But
yeah,
I would always prefer to see a game just like die in development than release as a freaking mess, especially after this long. Just
yeah.
or give it to somebody to finish it. But like
Well,
I would really not want to see this released unfinished.
yeah, yeah. That's true. And there's kind of this plague of the early access curse, right? That you get people into a game, they start playing it. There's a lot of games that are doing that. Many that are successful and hit those those roadmap milestones and get that release. I think what Satisfactory, after years of early access, they had theirs.
Oof,
Um,
nailed it.
but yeah, like Kerbal Space Program 2, something I was like really really
Did not
excited
nail it.
for. Did not nail it. No, I was, and it's they're still selling the game on Steam. It's discounted.
Really?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Isn't the
It's
studio out?
the studio's gone. They are done developing it. Like there's no rumors of any progress, but um, yeah, it's still on Steam and they're still discounting it, right? And you can go play it. It's a terrible buggy mess, and there are certain things that work, like atmospheric flight and stuff. You can make planes really well, but it's Kerbal Space Program, and a
Yeah.
lot of like the orbits are just weird, rendezvous are just weird, and that's the state that it's gonna just live in. And who knows? Like there's been some sales of it. Somebody's bought the IP and they may go in and develop it, but it sounds like the community has already kind of moved on and is putting their hope behind like alternatives. And there's like a kitten space agency that's being developed that's kind of a spiritual successor. But
Man, who bought them?
I don't I saw it
It
a
was
couple of
some
days ago.
company.
Yeah.
Some company bought them after they saw how good the first game was, right?
Oh yeah, it was it Take Two or
Take Two likes to do that kind of thing. Yep, Take Two.
yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, I
And
think they
so
bought it
this
thinking they would have an IP they could just do a quick plug and play on a version
yeah,
2, but it didn't
dude.
work that
And
way.
how freaking often does this happen, man? I'm so sick of this. This is like
Mhm.
it's just constantly some small studio makes a great game, people love it, and then some big publisher comes in and is like, "Oh, you love that? Well, we're just going to take it and make more of them." And then they suck
Yeah.
and it dies.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's rough. The death
it's
of the greatest era of video games will be
I've been ranting.
all these IP houses buying and selling rights.
Yeah. Yeah, we were ranting about this on the stream earlier today. The like gaming from 2006 to 2010 was just
Dude,
chef kiss, dude. It was
I right
I say
here.
I say
That's Jeb and Val next to a beaker. So I'm like, lots of KSP2 hits really hard. Yeah.
yeah. I didn't get to play the first one that much. I was looking forward to the second. I was like, "Oh, the second one's coming in. It sounds like it has some more stuff that I would enjoy. I'll give it a try." And then it released and everybody
Yeah,
said,
I played launch night for that one. Not pretty.
"That sucks,
So
man." Oh, you're
yeah,
used to not pretty.
yeah. As a
That's talking
Star
about Star
Citizen backer,
Citizen, by the way.
I was prepared for that. So.
I was hoping nobody took that as like a personal insult. Yeah, you know all about not pretty.
Dude, we're about
Um,
to lose our contacts over at CIG.
so CitizenCon going digital. In the end of the day, how much does that bother you?
I mean, I'd say like on a 1 to 10, like 1 being like just mildly annoyed and 10 being like I can't believe it's over. I'd say like a 2. It's it's disappointing. I'd look forward to the networking opportunities around CitizenCon. Being there in person was good, but at the same time, like you're in a convention hall with 5,000 other nerds, and you know there's only so comfortable you can actually be in that type of situation. But now we all get to enjoy it from the comfort of our own homes and listen to
Yeah,
it with our communities. So
we can have bar citizens in cities that are much cheaper than the
yeah.
places they decide to have citizen cons. 'Cause-
Yeah, and you can have your at-home drinking games every time a ship punches above its weight class, every time, somebody's face gets swapped out live, you come up with your own drinking games and bingo cards.
yeah, yeah. You guys in the garden, keep an eye out. You're gonna be doing something. All right. That's CitizenCon news. Let's talk about mining. Let's talk about gameplay and what's been going on in 4.1. Some big changes to the profession. Some stuff that people have been waiting a long time for. When is the last time we saw like a big change to ground mining in Star Citizen?
Ooh. I mean, when the Rock DS came out was like the last time a new vehicle actually came in, and it was such a wet blanket of a flop. It was
No, it changed everything, dude. Rock
yeah.
DS was huge. An
I will
expansion of the mind.
I will never miss an opportunity to make fun of the Rock DS because, like, you take what the Rock does and you make two people do it, right? So that's it. Like it doesn't do it better or faster necessarily. Like side by side, like two vehicles, two rocks, they're gonna outpace the Rock DS every time. It needs larger vehicles to haul
but
it. It's just yeah.
but
It's
Red,
such
I don't understand. Why is only one of the canopies protected?
yeah, no. Selling spacesuits? Like I don't know. I feel like there's some deep seated conspiracy in the United Resource Workers. Like that is the um that's where they put the new guy so that he doesn't break everything. Kind of
They
like
just lock
the
them up in there.
inside joke at the cabinet shop when you're like, hey, like, can you go help me find the wood stretcher? And it's like, hey, like, can you take the Rock DS out on today's mining op? So
Take the Rock DS and have an
like,
efficient trip, and then come back when you're
it's
done.
its greatest use is as a hazing ritual. Like that's my thoughts.
Yeah, I don't know what the heck. And the thing is, I don't think we've had explanations about these weird design flaws of them. CIG has kind of just started to make jokes about it as well. Like,
Yeah.
well, okay, but like, what's going on with this vehicle? What is this thing? Let me at least put a
Well,
tractor beam on this so it
and
makes sense.
I know you saw the Rock TS, right? The two mining
Yeah,
lasers on either side.
yeah.
At least they got some symmetry finally. But to bring it back to your original question, like when's the last time we had like a big mining update? It's kind of around that 318 when we used to have like the Quantanium meta. We'd go to Lyria and you just find Quantanium everywhere.
Hmm.
But the mineral distribution shift when they kind of rebalanced everything, um, that made high value rocks, kind of spread them out evenly across anywhere. So rock type didn't matter anymore. Asteroid type didn't matter anymore. Um, you had a roughly equal percentage chance to find your top tier materials in any single deposit anywhere. But like then the base materials are what you really had to care about because something like titanium and copper that are like high density, you need a lot larger ship to break that versus something with like quartz that's low density. That's where things shifted, and I think a lot of players that were like they didn't really know where to go and be successful until like somebody was there breaking down saying, hey, like yeah, like the rock mass here and like sell in is a lot more manageable for a solo break, and
Hmm.
you can go be successful there. Like if you want to, if you don't mind having a couple extra lasers and working a little bit harder for it, then yeah, like go mine where there's copper and titanium and work through that density factor. But
So
mm.
that change was something that made that better. People were able to more easily tell where they needed to go to get stuff they wanted.
I mean, a little better, but it also removed some of the previous, like what made mining really entertaining. Going out and hunting Quantanium at Lyria, right? You'd have the distribution of like every cluster you'd find was guaranteed to have Quantanium rocks in it. You'd go scan them, and most rocks would be like 2.135%, but you'd occasionally get these jackpot moments where you could go up to 50% on Quantanium in those
Right.
deposits just based on the way that like the rock recipe spawn things up. So um you don't get those jackpot moments anymore. Like occasionally you'll get a rock that's got like 2 or 3 tier 1 materials in it, which is pretty high value, but not nearly as often as and really almost rarely compared to what it used to be.
I see. And still, without crafting, there's not really much reason to mine anything else, anyways.
Yeah, and that's like the supply chain that they need to fill out. Because we're on the front end of the raw materials. We're salvaging, we're mining. We've got refining, but that's where it ends, right? And it turns into credits at that point. Sometimes we can turn that into mission rewards. So, the supplier die that we were out adjusting our mining routines to try and support that and making pretty good money compared to regular mining.
Hmm.
So
Yeah, I really, dude, I can't wait for crafting. I mean,
yeah,
I never was. I'm not that big a fan. I'm like, I don't want to do crafting myself, but I'm just so excited for that to give reason and motivation to things other than money in this game.
Yeah. Yeah, getting your, tier 5 ship upgrades done.
Yes.
There's gonna be a lot of people that are gonna appreciate that. I know, like, within my org, we have people that are just like they wanna be the researchers, right? And, we'll feed them as much raw material as they need to get to the next tier and kinda work through that, but it's
Yeah. Just put in your work orders.
yeah, yeah,
So mining has been pretty stagnant then for a while leading up to 4.1. Before we get into the big changes of 4.1, for anybody who doesn't really do much mining, maybe is learning about it for the first time or knows mining but doesn't know it super deep, can you talk a little bit more about the different things to consider when it comes to rocks? Because sometimes it can seem very simple, but you were just mentioning that certain materials make rocks denser, which needs more power. So, like,
yeah.
what kind of stuff do people need to consider when they're getting into mining?
Yeah, obviously location, location, location. The distribution is not equal everywhere. Their locations are going to have a lot higher density rocks, and the rock mass affects that. Your laser power is the main trigger there, and based on the rock mass, like if a rock is above a certain mass, you're generally not going to be able to get it. Um, so that's the main thing. Knowing the location and starting in 4.0. They moved all of the rock location data. I used to be able to take my game client download, extract the files from the game, and go dive into specific recipes for each planet, the rock types, and that's how I built my charts. 4.0, they moved that all server side. Now, there's been some great work from the community, specifically Ray Chaser from United Earth Mining Corporation. He set up this website, regolith.rocks, which has been one of the best resources I've seen. Like a couple of years ago, like I was tracking things on like an Excel spreadsheet and then a Google Docs sheet for like refinery orders and keeping track of that. But Ray Chaser developed this regolith system that did the refinery orders and really helped to do your crew splits and all of that automatically and tracked it in a web app. With the change in 4.0, the need now was that we couldn't go data mine the game files for location data, but we could have like crowdsourced survey data that all kind of gets compiled together. So there's this regolith survey core that as you're out mining, you can take snapshots and you can record the different certain like clusters of rocks and the materials in each, and that all gets aggregated up into kind of a replacement table, but it's all crowdsourced survey data from folks that are out there just mining along. So
The community makes the tools, man.
yeah,
This, I mean, for the longest time, this game's been driven by the community funding and literally teaching people how to play the game. That's
yeah,
appreciated having something like that. So,
yeah.
so location's important, but the game still doesn't really highlight location that much, right? I think
No,
the ice and tin was kind of the first time I saw them really specify where something could be found.
yeah. And it was not very detailed. And it's always kind of you're kind of like honestly like people reaching out to me saying like, oh hey, like where can I find ice asteroids? And it's like, well, they said pyro further out, like go to those asteroid clusters and see what you can get. But yeah, the survey data there helped a ton. Um, but that's been one of the complaints. Like it leaves a really great opportunity as a content creator um, to go and teach people and show them like how to go locate these and put together your charts and stuff and kind of explain the things that the developers don't do. But realistically, like they have all the data. Like they should be able to provide this. One of the things like we've got mining or we've got salvage missions to go clean up ships, and people can go do that, or they can just go search and find things organically.
Yeah.
Um, we don't have that for mining, and I feel like that's a big oversight and something like you can go give people the location of a mining claim, have them buy into it, similar to like the racing contracts. Like you have a fee you pay to go like sign up and it takes you to the racing location, it triggers the gates or whatever. Do the same thing with mining, right? Say hey, like there's there's some easy to use, easy to break rocks out here. You get a solar prospector and then send them out to a specific like mining claim site that will really match up with kind of an entry level skill, and I think that's going to be helpful for people. But that's what we don't have, and I think that would be
Yeah.
something that drives the game a lot further.
It's kind of wild we don't have mining contracts.
Yeah,
I don't think they've given an explanation for that, but they were working on them like 2 years ago and then they just disappeared.
yeah. And maybe it's because they saw the mineral distribution, revamp the way that we actually see and interact with the mineable resources. Um, and that could have been, hey, like, let's not put effort in here because it is going to change pretty significantly, and we can go put that effort somewhere else and drive that. Maybe they focused on dynamic events instead.
Maybe, I don't know. But the stuff that came into the game with mining in 4.1 is making it a lot more accessible to more people, it seems.
Yeah, yeah. The entry level price point for the Drake Golem, and it's got its trade offs. It's not a perfect mining ship to start, but I feel like it's very capable and enough to give a new player a positive experience in the game. And then the Atlas Geo is just, I mean, super fun. That was really entertaining to use, and um,
Dude, that thing is fun. The jump
yeah,
jets are so nice.
yeah. So,
What
yeah,
do you think of?
I
Oh,
do
sorry. Go
think
ahead.
it's making it a lot more accessible. So,
What do you think of the Geo? It kind of does mining on the vehicle and FPS side at the same time. Do you think that is gonna make it a little bit harder to make sense of the rock?
I don't think it replaces the Rock entirely, but I do see them occupying a very similar space. The Geo, I feel like, is probably a little bit better maneuverability within a cluster, and you're less limited. I can't count the number of times when I have been out rock mining. I've landed. My ramp is like a meter off of the surface when I'm going out, and I don't catch it until I'm trying to get back in. So then I've got to get out and tractor beam my rock up onto the ramp and get it going. The Geo, like the first time I took it out, I was in a Drake cutter and hovering like 10 meters off of the ground and just backed out and was able to jump back up and into it without any problem. So
Yeah, it's like
that
literally
alone
the
was
most.
yeah,
It's the
that
most
alone
maneuverable
helped
we've
it.
ever been.
Yeah, and it feels really good too. Like I as I'm like walking around on foot, I'm like smashing the space bar hoping that I jump, you know, like trying to
That's
hit
what I'm
that
doing already.
so, yeah.
Yeah, the Geo is a pretty cool addition. I feel like I don't think it's going to be super interesting to me until we get to see it in like caves. And
Yeah.
the only caves, I'm not super clear on what's going on with caves because they had that old style caves where you were meant to like fly in them and bring in vehicles and stuff. And then they
Yeah.
have the FPS style caves, but they've updated those. Do you know if the like vehicular caves have been updated too?
I haven't had a chance to do a whole lot of cave like spelunking with the mining updates. I was gonna try and go out to Kudre Ore, but I know that the Hathor caves that open up, those are accessible, and that's kind of what they're really pushing the Geo for. But yeah, one of my big concerns was that the sand cave, the entrance has a lot of vertical to it, and a lot of places where you've got to really vault up to get out. I think with the maneuverability limitations of the Atlas Geo, like you're not going to be piloting that mech suit down. You're probably going to be like tractor beaming it down and then using that. But it just seems like such a burden when you're going in just for hand minables that like your backpack has more capacity than what the Geo can handle. Right. The trade-off there
So
versus the Rock, yeah, I think the limitations are, um, it's going to be needs to be close to the support ship in order to be really effective. So
So do you think in most applications then the Geo is probably going to be more of a replacement for vehicular mining than FPS mining? Kind of like it's
Um,
just it's able to if there are FPS minables there, but usually it's being brought
yeah.
out for the bigger rocks.
Yeah, the Geo can do both. The Rock can technically do both. But when I've mined hand mineable sizes with the Greycat Rock, I am literally just pulsing the mining laser on for a very short period of time and hoping I didn't overcharge it too much. So, um, it's technically capable, but it's a struggle. The Geo is
But
able
I
to do
mean,
them both. But
it does. It sounds like what you're saying is that the Geo isn't really worth taking down into those caves when there are FPS minables.
Yeah, if you already have the FPS hand tool, I guess it makes sense that you don't have to you don't have to really like collect individually. Like you can have the extraction beam that does it automatically. But yeah, there I would say best case, like you've got a couple of geos down there and somebody that's like offloading the geos into their backpack and running back and forth so that the geo can keep mining. So
Hmm. Okay.
FPS mining and the backpack capacities. It's like right there at the same capacity, which is kind of it's an odd space. And I think one of the main criticisms of the Geo um, is just that's pretty limited. Like I was
Hmm.
offloading a full pod off of the Geo into a backpack with space to spare. So
Okay. Do you think that we'll see a FPS tool for mining, like a dedicated one that's not just a multi-tool?
potentially, but the one that we have for like salvage, it's got a very limited like usefulness.
Hmm.
It's if you're out there and you don't have repair facilities nearby, like it's good in a pinch. But I gotta tell you, repairing your ship and that method is like um, it's limited at what it can repair, and it's time consuming. And then like you have to already have like all of the RMC stored up. So if you're out there scraping the hull off of a ship for 45 minutes and like it just doesn't seem like that's a gameplay loop that has the time cost time benefit. Like 45 minutes you can jump just basically anywhere in the verse and go to a repair station and like pay a little bit of credits and be back out and already needing another repair afterwards if you're a combat pilot like I am. So
But you don't think that's going to change? I mean, it'll get better over time, right? You think they'll make these tools useful?
potentially like right now I have a hard time imagining like speculating on what the long term would be, and maybe that comes in with like crafting and being able to upgrade, that you'll have some better usability from these devices. um yeah, and I think there's other things I would rather them focus on priority wise than trying to get a mining dedicated tool like that salvage tool, because I literally have used the dedicated like SRT salvage tool like two, maybe
I
three
haven't
times.
used it.
Like I
Yeah,
can count it
I
on
haven't
one
used it.
hand, right? And most of that was just to get video recording, like to demonstrate that it's there and it does things. But
Yeah, yeah, they've not made much use of it just yet.
yeah,
I hope it gets
if
further. I mean, I would hope they would utilize it.
if you were a no ship pledge person, and that was your only way to make money, then maybe that would be helpful. But you know,
Maybe consider another
anybody
game.
yeah, anybody who's got a spaceship accessible to them can earn their way past that and beyond that much quicker. And maybe it's something that long term, it could be that there's a bunker and the door is wedged shut and you have to go and repair it with RMC, with that dedicated tool. You know,
Yeah,
but it
more stuff like
becomes
that just to
yeah,
make it useful.
it becomes a puzzle mechanic in like a dungeon crawl or something like that, rather than a full on gameplay loop. It's one key on the key ring.
Right. Yeah, which which is kind of how it should be at times.
Yeah.
So, what else is changing with mining in 4.1? We talked about the Geo. We'll get to the Golem as a new ship, but as far as somebody who is getting into this game and maybe wants to try mining for the first time, how has their experience changed with this update?
Well, if we're ignoring server performance and the unscannable rock that's generating for us, um,
The fact that
that's
they
like,
can't actually mine.
yeah, then the number one question I get is like, oh, I'm on planet whatever, or I'm on this moon, like, and it's not working. Am I doing something wrong, or is this the game? And like 90% of the time, yeah, it's the game. Occasionally, then you get somebody with the ID 10T error, and you just got to kind of explain your way through it. Like, hey, like, you might have forgotten to take yourself out of quantum mode, right? But the majority of the time, right now, people that are having unscannable rocks, it is yeah, it's game performance related, and they're working on addressing that. But
It's rough, dude.
yeah,
You can't even like mine in Stanton right now. What's up with that?
yeah, yeah,
Stanton Rocks are on
uh,
strike.
yep. They're on strike. The Hathor event has got them all shivering. So
But it's weird because they've got the Hathor locations on different servers.
yeah,
So what's the
um,
difference between a server in Daymar and the server on Bloom versus the server in Daymar and the server in Microtech?
yeah. I think there's probably some interactions going on there that you probably have to be a very experienced network engineer to explain. So I'd
No,
I'd like
dude.
to
Explain
speculate,
it
but
to me.
I'm sure there's at least one or two people that'll see this and be like, he is talking out his butt, and yeah.
Come on.
But
Give me the knowledge.
bringing back bringing back to the original question, like what else is changing with 4.1? We've got new vehicle mineable deposits. We had Baradom, Fainmaline, a few others there that are exclusive to that vehicle mineable size. So those are like the zero point 0.8 mass compared to like a zero point 0.1 for the FPS mineable. Um, so we saw this yesterday with the Fainmaline deposit, or sorry, it was Wednesday. But the instability there was pretty high, and you could see
Yeah.
that rock charge level go pretty crazy. I would say just pay attention to that. Be wary of it. And the other thing we got was additional mining lasers that you can now swap out on your size 0 heads. So the Geo and the Rock, as well as the Rock DS, have a set of mining lasers you can choose from. We've got the Lawson, the Arbor. There's a Helix. There is a Hofstede size 0 that should be compatible, but right now it is only compatible on the Rock DS. So, that's one I'm working on helping Signal boost some issue council reports on, because I'm a big fan of the Hofstede mining laser on the size 1 and size 2. Like it's one of my favorites to go to because it has a wider optimal charge window. It's a lot easier for a newcomer, and in a group situation, the benefits are just really great to be able to go through and have just a lot better instability and optimal charge window.
Hmm.
But we have those now, where we haven't had the option to swap out the lasers up to this point, and it gives you a little bit better option. You can start making some of those other decisions and really target it. Again, if you want instability reduction, you can go pick a laser for that, and then go out and have a better time. So,
I like that, man. I like that we're getting to change out the lasers and stuff on the smaller things because that was what made mining feel better than the other options in this game was that they had so many subcomponents and gadgets, and as long as you could make the rocks more weird and difficult, these
yeah,
tools could all make it a little bit more fun for a miner.
yeah. How often have you used the placeable gadgets on the rocks?
Not as much as I'd like, because I actually really like the idea behind them. I just haven't been mining that much since they came out, to be honest.
Yeah. And like I'm kind of guilty of this. Like it's much easier for me to call for an emotional support laser because like we're always mining in a group.
Yeah.
Um, but like if I'm out solo, yeah, I'll bring a gadget along. But generally, yeah, having a friend nearby is a lot easier than having to worry about getting the gadget placed, calibrating it, retrieving it after the rock's broken, or maybe losing it because you messed up on breaking the rock. So
So that seems like a pretty important thing in terms of game balance because these gadgets take a while to use. They cost a lot of money and they take up some inventory space. How
mhm.
do they make it so that when you use these gadgets, you are getting a significant enough boost in your returns that they're worth using?
Yeah. Obviously, it's all situational, right? The variety of rock mass you can come across, that's really the number one factor to determine whether or not you can break a rock. But if you get to a rock that's something you should be able to break and it's got a 50% resistance, that's where a gadget that brings in and has a 30% resistance reduction, that will make that rock now achievable, like something you can actually get the first break on and be successful with. So it's kind of that margin between a solo and maybe a duo, where if you bring those gadgets along, it helps increase your capabilities. But again, like up to about 4.0, like there were still some situations where even with a perfect break, no overcharge at all, the rocks were exploding and destroying all of your devices, like the modules
Yeah,
that are on your laser, and it just became
I remember that.
really, really expensive and annoying to have to manage. So
Yeah, I guess the gadgets will have to be more significant than the subcomponents, passive and active. That makes sense.
yeah. Yeah, but also to find balance there to um, they're still fine tuning, I think, what parameters each gadget's going to give you. But uh, yeah, uh,
What do you think of
making
like?
it. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, what do you think of them making these kinds of gadgets for the smaller rocks? I mean, those don't really have a difference in mass, so it's not as
Yeah,
bad.
if it needed it, it would make sense. But yeah, like I kind of laugh that the Geo had the spots on the side for your mining gadgets. I'm not attaching those to gemstone deposits. Like I did it once as a joke, and you know
Did it work?
yeah, it worked. It attached. It showed the differences, but like this is what, a $20,000 gadget you're attaching to a rock that you're gonna get like 10,000 credits worth max, right? And I doubt it was even that much. So
That's funny. The gadget must have been like as wide as the rock itself.
I actually had a really interesting bug where deploying the gadget would shrink it down to like half size, and then I deployed it again, and it was like quarter size. So like by the time I was done, I had this thing that looked like a stick of gum hanging out in my hand.
The
So
strongest stick of gum you could find.
yeah, sometimes Star Citizen bugs really deliver some fun content. So
Oh yeah, dude, it's classics. Love them. They keep me up at night, laughing and crying.
yeah.
So the Golem is the kind of final edition. We haven't talked about the starter ship. We did talk about a little bit about this in the beginning. It's making the profession more accessible. Um, bespoke laser.
Mhm.
What do you think of that? Not being able to switch that out.
Well, I can tell you, I am certainly glad that they made it something that had enough power to be usable. Um, it's got a pretty steep resistance and instability boost. I think it's like 35% resistance, 25% instability. Um, but optimal charge window goes up by 40%. So it adds some challenge, but also gives you the window to work with. I think it's the way they've positioned like the bonuses and stuff for it are really good, because it's high power. And I think it's matched with the Helix or really close. But the Helix reduces that optimal charge window. This goes the opposite direction and makes it a little bit easier to manage. So for somebody who's new, yeah, like learning the power management game, I think it's a great opportunity there. And the fact that you have two module slots, that gets you into the selection of like the right outfitting for your ship, understanding what your capabilities are, how
Hmm.
comfortable you are with that, because you can go and just really dive deep on the laser power, like put a couple of like focus, a couple of riggers on there that do a 25% boost each. You can add a surge for the first breaks and be really successful. Um, I would be really disappointed if they gave you kind of a piddly little low underpowered thing that, um, i- if your experience with the bespoke mining laser was that you could only mine like 1/10 of the rocks you came across, then I think that would turn a lot of people off.
Yeah.
But the way they've done it, like you can mine some of those more difficult rocks, a little higher mass, but you're going to want to make sure that you're good at that power management game and it's forgiving enough with the optimal window that it makes it something that you can really train into that gameplay.
That's appreciated. They didn't give it some typical starter level power. That's a
Yeah,
good point.
yeah. I could see a lot of people getting real frustrated if they come across a bunch of rocks that they just can't mine. Like,
There's also, at some point, miners who want to be safe are going to be mining in Terra. And there's
mhm.
going to be Terra and Castra. There's not really going to be much to get there. Even in Stanton, probably there will be less in places that are safer. But you can't just be like, oh, only small asteroids are in this part of space. So it
Yeah,
is kind of like you can't make it that the size of the asteroid dictates whether it's starter or advanced.
yeah.
Yeah, I never thought of that.
Yeah, I mean, CIG can do whatever they want. They write the rules for this,
Well,
but yeah,
yeah.
being realistic about it is, I also think, pretty important. For the miners that want to just be safe all the time, yeah, like you can go earn through volume, right? Quantity has a quality all of its own, but it's going to be a slog. You're going to be doing a lot more runs back and forth in those lower value materials because that's what you expect when you're taking low risk. It's going to be low return. Um,
Yeah,
the
exactly.
high risk, high return, you're going to have enterprising groups like myself that are trying to establish presences on the frontier, providing, some of that pipeline and supply chain. Say, hey, like, we understand it's risky out here. Like, we have a refinery you can come drop stuff off at. It's in dangerous space, but um, we'll buy it at a discount and take on some of that risk. And I think that's where orgs and kind of the space stations will really come into play.
That actually frustrates a lot of people too. The,
Yeah.
I mean, the gameplay being made for that kind of stuff.
Well, and
Um,
I think it also has to tie back into how certain people and orgs might choose to play the game, right? If they want to be an exclusive, like only the Garden or only the Red Legion can have access to the space station, like throwing the gates up, that type of thing keeps other players from being around and from enjoying those perks, whatever. But um, I think there's enough people that are interested in kind of that cooperative gameplay that there'll be an opportunity, to go to an org owned space station that maybe you're not affiliated with, but you can hopefully at some point develop reputation with an org like that and reap some rewards. So.
yeah, I like to think at least that the majority of players who are willing to work with others or are willing to play with others would
Yeah.
take a cooperative path.
Yeah, and there's always going to be people that just want to, the kids who go into the sand pit and knock everybody's sandcastles over, right? Like they just want to go out there and make a mess, and that's entertaining gameplay for people. Like, uh, that's how they want to play the game, but like that's not going to be long term successful. Um,
Yeah, you're not
you
going to
know,
make many friends that way.
yeah. But like if somebody's out there, like in my example, like if we don't know who you are at all, like, maybe we'll buy your resources at like a 30% discount, right? We won't pay full price for it, but the more that you contribute, the more that you're bringing stuff in, then maybe that becomes, well, okay, we'll only like we'll give you the better price here and closer to retail, that type of thing, as long as you develop that reputation.
Let's talk about, you mentioned high risk, high reward. One of the things that was added with this update, and I think maybe has been a little bit misconstrued as being just in part of this update, has been the Hathor locations and the minerals that spawn there. It sounds like they are exclusive to this location and they're fairly important as far as the game goes right now. How do you feel about that with regards to resource scattering? And would you want to see it be done differently right now, or what's your view?
Um, I mean, yeah, it's kind of that like the jump town type events, right? You've got something unique and valuable, and you got to work to earn it. Um, when it works consistently, I think that's going to be entertaining gameplay. Individual trying to be successful there probably won't have a good time. But if they're willing to be cooperative and work with a group, there's folks that are open and willing to accept that type of cooperation and bring people into the fold, or just say, hey, like, we'll form a short-term alliance. Like, you can join us for today. Like, that's fine, but just do your part and don't be a dick, right? And that's like kind of the basics of cooperative gameplay in a nutshell.
Yeah. There's a
Um,
difference between joining in with a group who's in the middle of doing it and helping them versus seeing a group bust open the cave and running over to them at the very end and being like, "Hey, can I have minerals too?" You're going to
yeah,
get different responses.
yeah, and so kind of knowing when to try and jump in, gauging that audience, and there's a lot that goes into kind of the massively multiplayer aspect here, but it is a multiplayer gameplay, and they're driving these type of events that will kind of force the issue, and yeah, a solo player might try and just sneak in all under the radar, but that's going to be up to them, right? They have to choose how they want to approach it.
So when it comes to the minerals down there specifically, because these, I mean, in order to pass Wickelow's contracts, for instance, you need to get those minerals. Do you think that they should be putting those elsewhere besides just in that cave?
Um, I mean, it depends. I really think the hard gatekeeping behind that, if it's something that's absolutely essential for game progression, would be really difficult. I think there's a couple of good examples from other games that have done this with a limited amount of success. One that pops up is like The Division, where you had like it's primarily an FPS shooter, but you have this dark zone area where a lot of the best loot was there. You had to go fight your way through, and then you had to extract within the dark zone in order to get this, the top tier loot that was all gated behind it.
Yeah.
That's a noisy event. It drew competitive players into the area, and as a solo player, you were going to be really difficult. Like, you were most of the time not going to be able to get the materials and like the top tier stuff out of that zone if you're just on your own, and that's toxic, right? But you need to provide maybe alternative ways that are still difficult and challenging, but something that a solo player could do. I think like Janelite in the caves, a hand mineable. I, it's difficult to find, but kind of get that payday. If they made it something like that, where you had to go and kind of navigate and explore and have this solo adventure where you're overcoming challenges on your own, to be able to get access to a second source of that. Um, that could be a good way to balance it rather than
Yeah,
forcing people into like group
they kind of started to get there with supply or die, but
yeah
we could have a ton of different ways of getting minerals. You could have like you worked your way up high enough in the syndicate so you know a fence that you can just buy
yeah
them from, or you like you said, you go and find them in a cave, but maybe it's just much lower quality or much lower quantity. Like there are ways for them to give other people access to these things,
yeah
but it does come off kind of obvious that at least right now they are trying to force people towards these areas.
yeah but how much of that is them really trying to force group gameplay versus trying to really put a stress test onto their server and their networking, right? I think that's a lot of the benefit that they're seeing from these events is you get a lot of players together. Um, it's stressing the whole server meshing, and it's kind of it breaks things, right? Which we all struggle with, but at the same time, I feel like it provides them a lot better learning opportunity than if they just had everything available for an individual to go, hey, like there's random caves that'll pop up here on this planet surface. It'll be like a cooling out lava tube where you get these fresh crystals at, and they're kind of transient. You go in and out, like, but as an individual, like you're not interacting with a whole lot. Like, it's not putting that stress test onto the networking structure and architecture, right? But I think that's really important for them to learn right now, and part of the reason why maybe they've pushed that direction. And as they need to stop breaking things so often and finding those limits and kind of the edge cases where you get, 4 Polari all together in one big fleet battle, you know, that that provides some learning, but again, as a solo player flying into that type of situation, your best option is just to hide or leave.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's why I do appreciate that there's still the changes to the rest of the mining sandbox with the ground vehicle and the changes to the resources themselves. Just it'd be nice if the game worked well enough for us to experience all that.
Yeah. And like honestly, if it comes to a point where there are exclusive materials, like if the only way that you can get a tier 5 upgrade for your Gladius or whatever is to have this exclusive material that's only from this one event, um, you know, player trading options, having orgs that specialize in that, you know, um, can set their own prices, like the player owned shops and stuff.
Yeah, there will definitely be other ways to do it. Hell, even
Yeah.
somebody like Wicklow maybe would turn around and also sell that stuff off for other things. Like we don't
Yeah.
know how much they'll expand each and every one of these systems they're adding.
Yeah.
All right, so let's talk about what might be next in terms of mining, both maybe based on what you've seen, what you've heard them say, but also based on what you want to see as far as Star Citizen gameplay goes.
Ooh, um, well, the elephant in the room is the Orion, right? The super large scale mining, with the Arastra and stuff. And of course, like right now, Space Tomato chooses to leave. No,
I'm back.
um, but no, the Orion and the Arastra getting into that ultra large scale. Um, I think we're going to see the mineral distribution types, like the actual mineral composition itself, will be shifted over to that new structure before those vehicles come out. I think, and I would hope because it would be really terrible to bring those in and then change it, 6 months or a year later. So, um, I think first getting into the monotype deposits where you've got the mineral type with the quality, maybe inert materials in there that can factor in, and then kind of converting that up to the gameplay scale that you need for the extraction buildings, right? Player owned bases that'll be pulling from those deposits. The Arastra, which will be kind of trying to mine a little bit larger scale. The Orion, which shouldn't really it's going to be space based, right? It shouldn't have capabilities to land. Um, and then stuff like the Pioneer, where it's going to be dropping down, maybe on top of a deposit, mining while it's setting up um, for a player-owned base construction.
So when we talk about getting larger scale in terms of mining, is this just literally bigger lasers cracking bigger rocks?
I really hope not. I hope it's something where you've got kind of the voxel based materials. I think I talked to you about this before, but the Maelstrom system having destructible environments and things that kind of fragment apart. Having a very very large rock deposit or something along those lines that um, the Orion can come in and break, and maybe you get a scan through there and you see some concentrations and like a heat map of it, so you know where to part right through one of those deposits, and then you can kind of cracking open both sides of the geode, kind of as an analogy there. You get the juicy stuff in the middle, but you don't have to get all the fluff on the outside. Um, I hope it's something like that, like using Maelstrom system or using some type of more advanced where right now the rocks we have are probably the size limitations. It's just it's small enough that the specific concentration for each doesn't matter as much. Like we see differences in that a little bit, but
Hmm.
you don't have pockets of just completely inert and then some occasional good materials in between. As we get to
Yeah.
larger scale, I'd love to see that, small like protoplanets and stuff that you could go in and take a couple hours or days to really break up. But
Actual deposits.
Yeah, and like I maybe shared this with you before, but like one of my dreams is to have like a meteor transit that you kind of fly in through the tail, and there's a whole bunch of rare materials in there, and you've got a limited time where it's actually accessible, but you can come in with some of those larger ships and really
Yeah.
lay waste to it.
Yeah. I mean, the the possibilities are really that's why people love the game so much. And it's frustrating that we don't know what they have planned for that kind of large scale stuff because we
Yeah.
can see the ship. I mean, they literally sold the Orion, but it's still sort of like, okay, but what is it actually going to look like? And that's always worried me when it comes to mining specifically because
Yeah.
I love parts of mining. I've never loved how they do deposits,
Yeah.
and I hope that changes.
Yeah, it certainly will, and I'd be excited to see how they manage the quality values right now. And if you can have, similar to how we have clustering right now, you have higher percentage of your top tier materials that you're going after. You get some
Mhm.
good breaks and bad breaks. If the good breaks and bad breaks are then a higher percentage, like a higher quality value for your good breaks compared to something that's like maybe a little bit more inert, lower value on others, that would drive some priority.
Yeah, I'd like to see that. And really, it's going to come down to crafting and whenever that comes in. You
Mhm.
think we'll see anything from that this year?
Crafting, I think
Yeah.
we'll get some early peaks. There'll be, maybe like weapon crafting and stuff that takes a couple of the materials. The fact is, we've got gemstones that are new. Those could feed into something, right?
Yeah.
And with our current refined and like raw materials, there's enough in that on that I guess ingredients list that we might be able to start seeing some basic crafting recipes come together. But I
I
think
hope
it'll
so. In
be
the
like,
EPTU at least.
yeah, it'll be like FPS style gadgets and kind of easy stuff.
I'd love to see that. I'm really excited to see where mining goes. I haven't done a ton of it, but I think a really like a high capacity like Arastra would be really fun to be
Hmm.
just an engineer on for a little while for me. Just get
Yeah,
to see it operating and watch everything moving around and people doing their jobs and getting to keep the ship running.
yeah, and that's that's kind of the great part about having an industrial focus group is we get to really showcase the ships and their kind of that multi crew capabilities of it. So
Yeah, love it.
yeah.
All right, Red. Thank you so much for joining me for this talk, dude. I'm gonna let you get going because I know you've got some your own Star Citizen to get to. But before you
Yeah.
go, you want to let everybody know where they can find more talk about mining? Because I'm telling you guys, if you want to know about mining, you can tell he knows
Yeah.
rocks.
I'm the rock doctor. Yeah, so you can find me at twitch.tv/RedMonsterSC. I do a Sunday morning mining session, 8 a.m. Mountain Time every week as we go through a group mining operation, really pushing the boundaries as far as what you can do at scale. I've got a couple other streams per week, and then I also kind of getting more active again, publishing out to my YouTube channel for tutorials, and I live stream to both. So if you've got a preferred medium to watch me through, there's that, and then also my Red Legion org that look us up on the RSI site, uh, and just aiming to be an industrial powerhouse in the verse.
Awesome, man. Well, thank you again for everything you do for the community. Thank you for coming back on this show today. Thank you, everybody, for watching. If you're on YouTube and you don't like ads, check out our audio platform show. If you're on the audio platform, consider leaving a review or maybe following. And for everybody else who just wants to track the stuff, come check us out across YouTube for more information. But that is it for today. CitizenCon, not physical, and mining becoming more so. And hopefully
Yeah.
you guys got some good information from this. Thanks again, Red, for coming on.
Yep, always a pleasure. Thanks, Tomato.
I will see you all next week.